Mark 14, verse 10. And Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests to betray him unto them. And when they heard it, they were glad, and promised to give him money. And he sought how he might conveniently betray him. Let's skip down if we can to verse number 19. And they began to be sorrowful, and to say unto him one by one, Is it I? And another said, Is it I? And he answered and said unto them, It is one of the 12 that dippeth with me in the dish. The Son of Man indeed goeth, as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Good were it for that man if he had never been born. Father, help me, I pray, as I preach your word this morning. And God, I pray that you would help our minds to be on you and on what you want to do. And God, I believe you've led me to this text, not just because it's the next thing in order of the book, but God, I believe this is the message for the hour. So I pray that you'd use me and be a help to our people. And God, sometimes the help that we need is not just a fuzzy feeling of encouragement, but sometimes we need a stop sign in our life. Sometimes we need to be reproved. Sometimes we need to be told that if we don't stop what we're doing, we're going to be in trouble. So God, I pray that you'd help us with this. May we take courage with your forgiveness and mercy, but may we love you with all of our heart and determined to never veer away from that. Please help me, I pray, to have my mind on you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. In Mark chapter number 14, we find one of the most heartbreaking parts of Scripture. There's several places in the Bible that we love to read because of the great promises that are there, because of the exciting truths and things like that. Sometimes we get to a passage and it's not a very nice one. Sometimes it's convicting or heavy or discouraging. This is one of the sad passages of Scripture because of what we see here. Now, if I were to mention before we read the text or anything like that, and I just said the name Judas to you, you would more than likely, most of you would have something in your mind as far as what kind of person he is without me even telling you. In Mark 14, verse 18, it says, one of you, in the middle of the verse, one of you which eateth with me shall betray me. So we know who that is, it's Judas, and Jesus says to the disciples there in that upper room, one of you are going to turn your back on me, one of you are going to decide not only to not follow me anymore, but one of you, you're going to purposely do something to harm me. That we saw amongst his own disciples that would not only betray him, but someone that heard him teach. Someone that saw him perform miracles, not just for other people, but perhaps even in his own life. Someone who knows exactly who Jesus is as the Son of God and still betrays him. He knows exactly who Jesus is, and yet he turns his back on him. What's interesting is we know this, and I think the 12 disciples, they obviously didn't know what Judas was about to do, but we find something about their own heart. In verse 18 again, Verily I say unto you, one of you which eateth with me shall betray me. And they began to be sorrowful, and to say unto them one by one, Is it I? Is it me? Am I the one that's going to betray you, Lord? And another said, Is it I? And he answered and said unto them, Is it one of the 12 that it is one of the 12 that dippeth with me in the dish? I'd imagine at that time they dropped their bread and kind of backed up a little bit. Make sure it's not me. I'm eating fried chicken instead of bread. But the Son of Man indeed goeth as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. The disciples knew something not only about the one that was going to betray, but I think they saw something in their own heart. They knew that there was the threat, the possibility of themselves doing something to turn away from the Lord. This morning I want to give you three principles just from the story, three ideas from this story. And I want us to see who and why people turn away from the Lord. Who turn away from the Lord, why people turn away from the Lord, and why people turn against the Lord. And by the way, it's not just Judas. I think we see that in their heart. And a good question that we could ask of the Lord and about ourselves, is it I? Number one, we find there was a betrayal from carelessness. There was a betrayal from carelessness. In verse 10, and Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests to betray him unto them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money, and he sought how he might conveniently betray him. The first of the betrayals is the most obvious. It's Judas. We talked about him last week. He was a thief, right? He was dishonest. He was a crook. He didn't. There wasn't a whole lot of spirituality about him. In fact, there's really none. In fact, in John 17:12, referring to Judas Iscariot, Jesus calls him the son of perdition. Perdition means judgment, or someone who's not always damnation as in hell, but perdition meaning damnation or judgment. Consequences are about to happen to that person. So he's the son of judgment. He's the one that is about to receive a terrible judgment. That is not a good thing. There's another person in the Bible that's referred to as the son of perdition. It's the Antichrist. Now, Judas was not the Antichrist. We could call him an Antichrist, but that's a bad name to be called, the son of perdition, the receiver of punishment. In Luke 22:32, it says, at the time of the betrayal, right after what we just read, it says, then entered Satan into Judas, named Iscariot. Judas, in just a moment, at the end of Mark 14, he would not just be demon-possessed, he'd be Satan-possessed. What's the difference? There are thousands, perhaps millions of demons, but there's one devil. I think Satan meant business to take over the mind and heart of that man. Again, I don't believe, based on this and other places that talk about him being the son of perdition, I don't think for a second Judas was saved. He was a follower. He went with the Lord where he went, and he heard him teach. But I don't think Judas was saved, which is why he could have been demon-possessed or devil-possessed. But why? Why would Judas do this? And by the way, he made the decision to betray the Lord before he was Satan-possessed, devil-possessed. In verse 10 and through 11, we just read this. In verse 11, when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. He betrayed him for money. But then there's an idea, a word that stuck out to me when I was studying this week for this passage. And it says, and he sought how he might conveniently betray him. He sought how he might conveniently betray him. So Judas went to the priests and became the tool they needed to have Jesus arrested and killed without the difficulty of the crowd. The Pharisees, they had tried again and again to have Jesus arrested. In fact, they tried to kill Jesus on a number of occasions. But here they said, okay, we can't arrest him in front of people because people think too highly of Jesus. So they were trying to figure out a way they would know where Jesus is when no one would know. Well, Judas had that information, right? So they decided that's how they used Judas. They betrayed Jesus by finding out from Judas when Jesus would be alone. Hopefully I said all that right. So they paid off Judas. Why would he be paid off? Because he's greedy. Because he's a thief. And he wanted to figure out a way to conveniently betray Jesus. That's a bad thing when you live your life for convenience. But Judas was in that instance. Whatever was easier and better for him. So the disciples, they're all in the upper room the night before his arrest, and Jesus tells them, and in verse 18, and as they sat and did eat, Jesus said, verily I say unto you, one of you which eateth with me shall betray me. Skip down to verse 21. The Son of Man indeed goeth, as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Good were it for that man if he had never been born. If Jesus says it would be better for you to have never been born, that's a bad thing. He may have lived a decent life, but it'd be better for him never to be born. Why? The only true reason I could think of, because if he had never been born, he would never die and go to hell. And again, he didn't, by the way, if he did die and go to hell, it wasn't because he betrayed the Lord. It wasn't because he was a thief. It's because he had never trusted Jesus to be his Savior. Then again, we see Judas again in verse 43. So skip down near the middle to the end of the chapter, verse 43. And immediately, while he yet spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, with him, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And he that betrayed him had given him a token, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same as he, take him and lead him away safely. So we find Judas betrayed the Lord because he was greedy of money. We find Judas betrayed the Lord because he wanted to do it simplicity, conveniently for himself. He betrayed the Lord because he was Satan-possessed. And he betrayed the Lord this way. And again, I think this pictures the issue of Judas's heart. He goes up to Jesus in front of everyone, knowing what he's already done, knowing what he's about to do. He walks up to Jesus, kisses him on the cheek, which back then would not have been awkward. He kisses him and calls him master. Is he Judas's master? No. He's expressing some love by kissing him. Did he love him? No. What was the reason for Judas's betrayal? Carelessness, coldness, simple indifference toward the Lord. He didn't care about him. He cared about himself, he cared about money, he cared about his own convenience, but he did not care about the Lord Jesus Christ. Again, he heard the truth about Jesus. He heard Jesus say that he was the Christ. He heard Jesus say that he was one with the Father. He heard that Jesus say that he would die and rise again. He heard Jesus teach all these things. He saw Jesus raise the dead. He saw Jesus do all of these things, and yet Judas says, I don't care, I want him dead. The coldness of his heart. He was so callous to who God was and who Jesus was. Well, how could any man betray Jesus? He was careless and cold. In Matthew 13, Jesus was not speaking of Judas, but of other people and people in general, and why they turned from the Lord and things like that. In Matthew 13, verse 15, for this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and should understand with their heart and should be converted and I should heal them. So Jesus says this is the reason why some people have a problem with the truth. It's not that they can't understand it. It's not that they're unable. It's that they turn it off. Now there's the issue of people not being understand. But he says people, they're dull of hearing and their ears are waxed gross. They can't see with their eyes. They're blinded from the truth because they have turned him off. They've turned their eyes off. They've closed their ears. People make a choice to ignore God. God speaks to them. God convicts them. God shows them the truth. And they say, I don't want to hear it. So they harden and they coldinated. They cool their heart from the Lord. Judas had to have done that. As he saw the Lord and heard the Lord, he turned his heart away from the Lord. People are missing the ability of God to work on their life and give them lasting help and change because they make the choice to harden themselves from the Lord. It's sad that a lot of people do that. And it's not just, by the way, Christians can do that. God can show you some truth about your Christian life, things that He wants you to do, things He wants you to sacrifice, and you say, no, I don't want to do that. And He convicts you and maybe chastens you, and no, I don't want to do that. It's still worth it to me to disobey the Lord. You harden and cool your heart. And God might say, fine, I'm going to still punish you, but have it your way. But it's terribly sad when a lost person does that. They hear the gospel. They hear how Christ loves them and died for them, and how they can be saved, and they say, I don't want to be saved. I don't want to go forward at an invitation. I don't want to acknowledge that I'm lost. I don't want to. And people get a wrong idea. They get convinced that if I get saved, I'm going to have to do all these things. And for whatever obstacle they put between them and the Lord, maybe they have to give up a religion or whatever. Whatever it is, they put up some obstacle and they turn God off. And because they ignore the gospel, because they ignore the conviction and the drawing of God, they turn God off and they die and go to hell. Because they're unwilling to get saved, they're unwilling to respond. Can a person do that, really? Yes. People can shut off the Lord again and again and again to where they don't hear His voice anymore. Why would Judas betray the Lord? Because of the callousness, the coldness, the carelessness of his heart. Why do we sometimes turn away from the Lord? Maybe not as extreme as Judas, but God convicts us and we harden our lives. There's betrayal from carelessness. But you know, Judas was not the only one, even in this chapter, to turn on the Lord. There's a second person I want you to see. Look in verse 27. Again, the word betrayal is not here, but they're still betraying the Lord, turning on the Lord. We'll use a more specific word, denial. In verse 27, and Judas saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. But Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. And Judas, that's a bad mistake. And Jesus saith unto him, verily I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. But he spake the more vehemently, if I should die with thee, I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. First we see Judas betraying the Lord, and secondly we see Peter denying the Lord. All ye shall be offended. Not me. No. All of you will be offended at me. What does it mean to be offended in the Bible? It means offended does not mean this. The preacher hurt my feelings. That's not what the Bible word offended means. Offended means it causes you to fall, to stumble, to be pushed down. Now, Jesus is not the one that pushes them down, but because of what Jesus was about to do and going to the cross, he says, people are going to be offended at this. Not me. Jesus, I would never be offended. I would... Listen to let's switch out the word. It's accurate being offended, but meaning to fall. Jesus, I will never fall. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. Jesus said, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. If I should die with thee, I will not deny thee. I would never. But what happens? Let's look in the same chapter. Go to verse 67. Mark 14, verse 67. I want you to see these. And when he saw Peter warming himself, she looked upon him. This is a maid there, a young lady. She looked upon him and said, and thou also wast with Jesus of Nazareth? But he denied, saying, I know not, neither understand I what thou sayest. You know Jesus, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he went out into the porch, and the cock crew. That's denial number one. Look at verse 69. And a maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, this is one of them. And he denied it again. And a little after, they that stood by said again to Peter, surely thou art one of them, for thou art a Galilean, and thy speech agreeth thereto. But he began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not this man of whom ye speak. Jesus, I would never turn against you. I would never deny that I know you. I would never deny that I'm a Christian. I will never be so embarrassed that I would admit that I know you, that I have a relationship with you, that I'm following you, that I'm trying to do right. Jesus, I would never do that. But then he did. But then he did. But then he did. In fact, I don't know what you're talking about. Then he got more specific. I don't know the man. The third time, he cusses. And he swears. Not only did he deny, but he shot his testimony to pieces. He denied that he knew the Lord at all. Why? Why would Peter do that? Judas is perhaps an easier target because of his thievery, because of his greediness, because his life was all about self. Peter wasn't quite that way. Peter was an idiot sometimes, but Peter, just like we are, but Peter wasn't quite that way. He was a little bit more, he was actually saved. He was a bit spiritual. But in this text, I think we find three reasons why he would deny the Lord. Let's back up. We already read one of them, but in verse 27, all ye shall be offended, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, but after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. But Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. Reason number one, because of pride. He had a heart of pride. Why would Peter deny the Lord? Because he had a heart of pride. I will never. He thought too highly of himself. Verse 37, we find another reason. So after they leave and they hear the teaching of Jesus, which is, I think, John 13 through 15 or 16, something like that. There's more than that, but multiple chapters there in John in the upper room where he teaches. They had the Lord's Supper together, but then they go to Gethsemane. So they leave the upper room, they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus leaves 9 of the disciples here. He takes Peter, James, and John. He takes a little bit further his main disciples, and he takes them and he sits them there. And then he goes on and he prays. So while he goes to pray, he gets up to go check on his disciples. And what are they doing? They're sleeping. They're supposed to be doing what? Praying. Praying, watching, but then they were sleeping. Jesus asks Peter in verse 37, at the end of verse 37, Simon, Sleepest thou? Couldst thou not have watched? I can't read this morning. Couldst not thou watch 1 hour? You weren't able to stay awake, pay attention, and pray for 1 hour? I've been betrayed. I'm about to die, and you can't pray for me for 1 hour? There's a neglect of prayer. And then there's another one, I think it's a great picture in verse 54. Mark 14:54. The first phrase, I think, is a great picture of what Peter was at this moment. And Peter followed him afar off. There's different reasons for that, but he had a heart of pride. He was neglecting of prayer. And then there's distance from Jesus. And I think that pictures it. He was distant from Jesus. How? Why? Because of pride. Why was he distant from Jesus? Because of prayer. He had not committed to time with God in prayer. He was distant in person. He was ashamed to be with Jesus. Jesus was there. He should have stuck by the Lord. He should have stayed close to him. He did try to defend the Lord. He cut a guy's ear off. That didn't go so well. But he should have stayed with him, and he should have kept saying, I know him. I'm on his side. He did not do what you're lying to him about. Some of the things that they claimed of Jesus were true, but sometimes they lied. But Peter should have stood with the Lord, but instead I'll just follow him. I'll still follow him. But I don't want to be so close to Jesus so that people associate me with him. When we have a heart of pride, it distances us from Jesus because we become dependent upon ourselves. When we're supposed to be in prayer and spending time with God, but we don't, we're distancing ourselves from Jesus. What was wrong with Peter? He was distanced from Jesus. By the way, that's not the point, by the way. That's not the point number 2. The first one was carelessness, but I think it goes even deeper. Why is it that you and I allow ourselves to become distant from Jesus? Why is it that you allow yourself to become distant from anybody? So, Jesus goes to the cross, he dies, he rises again, and we remember Jesus finds Peter and the other disciples fishing. They see the Lord, Peter jumps out of the boat, swims to the shore, and they sit down and have a conversation. And Jesus asks Peter about one issue. In John, go ahead and turn there. Go to John 21. If I understand this right, the first conversation, well, no, I guess there's other ones, but shortly after Jesus dies, the first one-on-one conversation we find between Jesus and Peter is here. So after the denial, John 21:15. So when they had dined, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Look at verse 16. He asks him again. He saith to him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Verse 17. He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? What issue did Jesus question about Peter? Do you love me? I believe Judas had a problem with a callousness, with a coldness, with an indifference toward Jesus. Well, it's Peter's problem. He betrayed him because of lovelessness. Might be a word. Lovelessness. That's a little bit different. Judas completely rejected Jesus. Peter just allowed himself to become distant through pride and through prayerlessness, but because he did not love the Lord like he should. You want to know why you and I get away from the Lord? You want to know why we don't spend time with Jesus like we should? You want to know why you don't read? I'll be more specific. You want to know why you don't read your Bible? Assuming you don't. Some of you do. You want to know why you struggle to have a prayer time? What is prayer? It's talking to the Lord. Because you don't love the Lord like you should. How dare you accuse me? You want to know why I can say that to you? Because I can say that to me. You talk to the people you love. You should. Sometimes we get busy with other things, but what is that? We're placing something else at greater importance. Peter denied the Lord because he did not love him like he should. And the reason I say that is because that was Jesus' question for him. Do you really love me? Oh, and by the way, when you read that, he kept on saying, you know that I love you. Yea. You know that I love you. By the way, there's a difference. Ladies, you'll know this. Baby, do you love me? You know I do. Then say it. You know I do. Then say it. You know I love you. There's a difference between you know I love you and I love you. Isn't there? And if you're in the Greek, it's helpful. I like you. I like you. It was a different kind of love that Peter had for Jesus than what Jesus wanted him to love him with. We begin denying the Lord and our obedience when we're distant. We begin living for our own interests when we're distant. Why do we become distant from the Lord? Because we don't love Him like we should. Then there's a third one. We'll have to look at this quickly. It wasn't just Judas, and it wasn't just Peter. In Mark 14, verse 27, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night. Who's going to fall? All of them. Which disciples stayed with Jesus through the arrest and wrongful trial? We do find John later, but at this moment they all turned. All ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. Now look down in verse 50. And they all forsook him. Some came back. We find at the cross, we find the Marys all there, and we find Jesus, or the Apostle John there. But at this moment, who forsook him? All of them. Why? Their shepherd was smitten, taken, and is now leaving them, so they fled. I was thinking, trying to figure out why this was just before, and I think this is probably part of it, and it kind of makes logical sense. Kind of. Right before this, they're in Gethsemane. Judas shows up, but Judas doesn't show up alone. By the way, he didn't just have the priest with him either. It wasn't just the Pharisees there with him. In verse 43, and immediately while he yet spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves. I don't know how many are there, and I'm not going to argue with the Bible. Generally, when the Bible speaks of a multitude, it is thousands. Let's assume it's 1,000. That's a lot of soldiers to arrest one man. So you're there, you're supposed to be in prayer, and you wake up, you're kind of half asleep because you're supposed to be praying, but you're sleeping. And all of a sudden you open your eyes and you see 1,000 soldiers coming your way with swords and staves ready to fight. I'd be a little bit scared too. We find the story in other passages, Jesus speaks and they go falling backwards and things like that. But why did the other of the 12 betray the Lord too? Because of fearfulness. Fearfulness. They were afraid, which we understand, but they should have stood by Jesus' side regardless. I wonder if they knew this psalm. It's a great one to memorize. The Lord is on my side. I will not fear. What can man do unto me? Man can do a lot of things. But when the Lord Jesus Christ is on your side, what can man do unto me? There's another psalm I thought of in Psalm 27. Though an host should encamp against me. In other words, when there's an army facing me, though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though the war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. We can have confidence in God regardless of who and how many stand against us. Now that's a good spiritual talk from behind the pulpit. And understand they weren't feeling very spiritual. But the fact is we can stand with faith in God regardless of who stands against us. Especially when we have Jesus Christ, the Lord God Almighty, standing by our side. I think they were realizing something. I mentioned this last week, I believe. There's always a cost to being associated with Jesus. There's a risk. There's a risk to you being an outspoken Christian. 2 Timothy 3:12, yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. There's a cost, there's a risk to standing for the Lord. You want to know why they didn't? They were unwilling to pay the price They're unwilling to endure the risk. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't stand with Jesus and say, "You've got to take me too." They ran off like scared little girls. They did. Peter, he was afraid of. Peter was afraid of that little maid, of making fun of him and talking about. Maybe he was afraid of being arrested too. But regardless, all of the disciples, at least the 11 that remained, they were afraid. They were afraid of looking bad. They were afraid of damage being done to them when they would have just gone to heaven. But they were afraid. They didn't care about the Lord like they should, or they didn't love the Lord like they should, and they were more fearful of other people than the Lord. Made me think of something else. What happens when we decide I don't care about the Lord, or I don't love the Lord like I should, or I don't trust the Lord like I should? Let's look. And we'll be done. But for someone to decide I don't care to live for Jesus anymore, and that's what they did. It was temporary. Judas, he wasn't temporary. We'll see him in just a second. Peter and the disciples, they get right. But they decided in that moment, what does it mean to betray or to deny or to flee away from the Lord? They decided, at least for a moment, I'm done. The disciples, I go a-fishing. They went back to their old life shortly thereafter. They decided, I'm not going to live for Jesus anymore. I'm not going to be His follower anymore. I'm done because the risk is not worth it. I'm done paying the price, being a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm not going to go to church anymore. I'm not going to read my Bible anymore. I'm not going to pray anymore. I'm not going to stand up for Jesus anymore. I'm done with it. I'm done living for God. At least maybe I'll be mediocre, but I'm not going to stand like God wants me to stand. What's the end of that? What comes from deciding I'm not going to be a follower of Christ anymore? Matthew 27, let's look at Judas quickly. We'll go to Matthew 27 and then Luke 22. In Matthew 27, Judas, he was lost. He didn't know the Lord. He did not understand that he could be forgiven. And by the way, this ought never be an option, but this is what Judas did. Matthew 27:3. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, meaning Jesus was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou to that. In other words, fix it yourself. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. How did Judas deal with his betrayal? Suicidal regret. Luke 22. What about Peter? And I think this is a great indication of the difference between a Judas and a Peter. Judas died that day. Peter did not. Peter went on and served the Lord, but before he became a great man of God, something else happened in Luke 22:62. I know I'm kind of bouncing around, but all of these are the same story, just different details. In Luke 22:62, verse 61 is the betrayal. Let's read verse 61. In Luke 22:61. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. So what happened at the third betrayal? As soon as it happens, they turn, they lock eyes. That makes it a little bit different. He's got to face the one that he denied. Verse 62, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. Do you know what ought to be the result, and is the result of a Christian denying the Lord? Bitter tears. There ought to be some regret and some weeping when we turn against the Lord. But if you decide I'm done, this is what you ought to expect. Bitterness. And then the whole crowd, and back in our text in Mark 14. We already read this as well. In Mark 14, in verse 27, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. What happens when you decide, I'm not going to follow the Lord anymore? You'll be scattered. No more shepherd. Doesn't mean you lose your salvation, but you lose your guide. A directionless life. Judas had suicidal regret. Peter had bitter tears. And the 12 as a whole had a directionless life. Did you know you can be saved and you can decide, I'm done? You can decide as a Christian, I'm not going to live for God anymore. There's lots of Christians that never start living for God, whether it's lack of teaching or whatever. They get saved, they trust Jesus to be their Savior, their sins are forgiven, and they live a miserable Christian life. People do that. You can be saved and decide, I'm done. I'm not going to church anymore. I'm not going to tell people about Jesus. I'm not going to follow the authority of the Bible. You can do that. Hebrews 12 says you won't get away with it. God will deal with you as with sons. God will punish you as His own child. By the way, be here tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll talk about that. But what will the result be of you deciding I'm done? Regret, bitterness, and a directionless life. It's your choice. Or you can live your life for the Lord. By the way, if you've already made a decision to turn away from the Lord and turn away from what you know is right, you can do what Peter and the others did. They went running back to the Lord. Amen. They were forgiven. That's why they were able to be used again. Judas didn't. Judas decided to stay in his own sin, and he died a terrible death. But the other 11, they decided to get right with God. There's always that option. But what's the point? Is it I? Or would you say, like Peter, I would never? You have, because of your sin nature, you personally, every one of you, you have the capability to turn away from the Lord and not live for Him anymore. It doesn't end your salvation, but it ends the blessing of God until you get it right. You can make a choice to turn away from God, but please don't. You can live a life of joy and blessing and peace and God's direction and God's filling and God's help and God helping your marriage and helping your children and helping your life, and God can provide for you and God can work in your life. But you can have all those things, or you can decide, I'm going to be like Peter. I'll still have my ticket to heaven, but if people ask, I'm not going to deny Him. I'm going to be a little bit, I'll be distant, not too far away, but I'll be a little bit distant. I'll follow Him from afar. You could be that way, but you'll end in bitter tears. Stay close to the Lord. Keep your heart tender towards God. Stay close to Him and love with Him. And trust Him.